Hi everyone. So the next slide will then show that the line is actually blurring in terms of gas, RE, green gas, renewable gas, natural gas. Is blurred, and that it's not just the transition of the energy is blurred. It's also the blurring of the professionals. So you have professionals from the oil and gas sector moving to the energy sector. Like Barbara used to be in gas, now she's with renewable energy. Dr. Wei-Nee used to be the champion or the mother of solar in Malaysia, because I knew her when solar was like, what is solar in Malaysia? So we was already championing solar. So you have her now in the oil and gas sector, and then you have Suhana, who's in the national. I won't call it national oil company because now it's not. I think it's now rebranded as National Energy Company, if I'm not mistaken. So Petronas as a national energy company, which has been the driving force in terms of oil and gas in Malaysia and has gone international as oil and gas, are now transitioning also towards the RE sector, and the Suhana being previously a gas person just before she moves to the new energy. So still, but still attached to a division called gas and new energy. So that is blurring. The boundaries are blurring. So it will be a quite interesting conversation. Okay. So Nabila just now, Bella has just introduced you to Barbara Jinks, Dr. Wei-Nee Chen, and also Sohana Siddiq. I will not read their bio because I think it's best that if we get them to introduce themselves. So I would like now to invite Dr. Wei-Nee Chen. Can you tell us something about yourself? Tell us about your background in energy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, clear.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Encik Rosman. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to Encik Hasli Sham Kasim, the president of MGA, and also our very esteemed fellow women speakers, Barbara Jinks from IRENA and Puan Suhana Siddiq from Petronas. And also good afternoon to participants from the Petronas Leading Women Network, MGA members, the MyWe community, Malaysia Women in Energy. And I understand this afternoon we also have participants from my hometown, yes, the Sarawak Energy Berhad. So if that being the case, a very warm greetings to SAB, notably Puan Hajah Siti Aisyah Adinan, Senior VP of Corporate Services of SAB. So first and foremost, Encik Rosman, thank you very much to MGA for inviting me to speak in this very exciting platform of women in energy transition. Admittedly, I seldom have the privilege of speaking in a woman energy platform. Actually, my last and only one other invitation was made by the Sarawak Energy Leading Women Network in December last year, which I was very honored to share the same platform as Puan Hajah Siti Aisyah, as well as Piang Tajam, who is the GM of Corporate Communications. And we had a lot of fun during that virtual fireside chat. And I'm sure that this afternoon we'll have similar fun session as well. So a little bit about my background, which some of you who are a bit earlier, if you've tuned in, you've listened to half of my story already. Originally, I'm from the lovely state of Sarawak. And actually, my original career, I did not start off in the energy sector. And my background is actually in the IT sector. I was in New Zealand for nearly more than 14 years. Completed my basic degree in IT and served in the IT industry in New Zealand for more than 10 years. Then after that, the family, my husband and I, we decided to come back to Malaysia, and we settled in Sabah, yeah, in East Malaysia, and we had 2 daughters. And since coming back from New Zealand, I had this desire that I want to serve my remaining career, number 1, in the government sector, number 2, in a sector that will improve the environment. So in that regards, there was an opportunity at the end of 2005 when UNDP actually was looking to recruit for team members under this particular GEF-funded project called the Malaysian Building Integrated Photovoltaic Project, a project which was actually jointly implemented by the Ministry of Energy. So I think that's where Encik Rosman thinks that I'm the queen of solar energy. Yeah? But admittedly, it's true. Solar is still a subject which is very, very close to my heart. And that particular MBIPV project ended up with the passing of two important bills. One was the Renewable Energy Bill, and another was the SEDA Bill, which allowed the establishment of SEDA in 2011. And I became part of the pioneering member for SEDA, whose primary role is actually to implement the feed-in tariff in the country. So I was with SEDA for 9 years. I served there initially as a chief corporate officer, and then somewhere in between, I was acting CEO for about half a year. And then I ended up being a chief strategic officer. And as Encik Rosman knows me very well, I'm very passionate about renewable energy. In fact, my last mandate in SEDA was to develop the renewable energy transition roadmap. And I believe that the roadmap will be released hopefully by the second half of this year. And in mid-September last year, I opted for early retirement after having served for nearly 15 years the Ministry of Energy in Putrajaya. And that's when I decided to join in the energy transition in the oil and gas sector. So funny how I end up in the oil and gas sector, because my dad has worked all his life in Shell, and my family does all our livelihood to the oil and gas sector. And today, one whole circle has come back, and I'm back into this oil and gas sector within the energy transition context. So basically, Encik Rosman, this is my background. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Wei-Nee. I think we still remember the days when MPI AV was introduced, and during that time, even the take-up was not so not so impressive. But suddenly, when FIT comes in, everybody now wants a share of the solar. Okay, so we now shift the camera all the way to Bonn in Germany, and let's listen to what the Barbara Jinks have to say about her life. Barbara.
In one sentence. No, good morning from a very sunny Bonn, and happy Ramadan Karim, if that's the proper way to say it in Malaysia. Yeah, so I am Scottish by upbringing, but I traveled the world, and I actually lived in Australia longer than I ever lived in Scotland, so I'm a bit of a mixture. I fell in love with the oil and gas industry when I was about 12, because it was just on the news in Scotland, and in fact it was gas exploration, not so much oil, and I just thought I have to get on one of those rigs. So I studied engineering, and I did get a job with Shell, and I worked on the rigs, and from then it was just exciting, and there was never a reason to leave the gas industry, because it's just a wonderful industry, and it keeps changing. It's always in transition itself. So I worked as a project engineer, and then eventually project manager, project director, and at that time in the late 80s, the word EIS and EIA was quite new, the whole environmental aspect of anything we built and did. So I very quickly thought this is the right place to be. So I moved into the environmental side of the gas industry. So that was very much making sure we followed government regulations, environmental protection orders, and that we innovated in pipeline construction to being less environmentally, being more environmentally sensitive, and that felt right, and that was a great career in Asia and Australia, offshore, onshore pipelines. Then later on, we became more aware of the climate, the issues with the climate, and in the 80s, gas was saving us because it was cheaper and cleaner than coal and oil, and then gas became not so favour it because of climate change and it's still a fossil fuel. So I very naturally was attracted to looking at the role of gas in helping reduce the impacts of climate change. So that took me into roles that looked more about green gases and the use of the gas grid to transport green gases. And I worked for associations and in government liaison, and I moved back to Europe 3 years ago, so now I live in Germany, and I was working in Brussels, representing the gas industry and its role in transporting green gases and the role of natural gas with blue hydrogen and as a backup for renewables. And then it seemed an absolute natural step to work with IRENA, because that was just really a natural progression to really trying to be more effective and be an advocate for the role of gases in this time where we're really trying to address climate change. So that's, I have two boys, two gorgeous boys, one in Australia, one in Scotland, a bit like Dr. Wei-Nee. I haven't hugged them for about 1.5 years because of Corona, so that's hard, but they're all healthy and happy. Thank you. Back to you, Rosman.
Thank you, Barbara. So I think it's sad that during this COVID-19 days, that families do not meet each other. I think Dr. Wei-Nee mentioned earlier that you're supposed to meet your family during Christmas, so it's sad. But before we go, it's not supposed to be a sad day today. It's supposed to be a bit more casual kind of thing, So last but not least, I would like to shift the spotlight now to KLCC, in particular to Suhana Siddiq. Suhana?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's probably not going to be a sad day, especially for me, because this year MCO, while working from home, is the first time that I actually get to break my fast at home every single day instead of the office and all that. So that's a blessing for me, especially. A bit about myself. I'll probably start when we talk about personal introduction. I'm actually a Mat Kelantan who cannot speak Kelantanese. So right. So I studied engineering in Melbourne in electrical and electronic, and spent my entire career in oil and gas before this, working on various parts in upstream, and with only one company, PETRONAS. So I was in design house, I was in fabrication site in Johor. So I remember being the first lady to be on site when we got mobilized to Pasir Gudang, working on the biggest integrated platform then. But it was quite an experience. I then decided to spend time in office to look into upstream strategy. So I got back to KLCC looking into more of the international country expansion for upstream, looking into country entry and growth and all that. So in April 2019, PETRONAS set up Gas and New Energy. So it's part of our customer-centric approach to providing cleaner energy solution, both gas and new renewable. So for me, it was a job transition. And there was a time when I was actually offered to go back to upstream when the transition was over. But as the saying goes, once you go green or cleaner, you don't look back. So one day I woke up and I was so determined to do renewable. And in February 2020, I started my journey in new energy. So I am today the head of, as you see, portfolio management and risk for new energy. So we support PETRONAS agenda in stepping out into renewable. New energy that you see today has approximately 1 gigawatt of renewable projects operating and under development in Malaysia, India, as well as Dubai. So we looked into technologies such as solar, wind, hybrid, as well as energy storage. And we're part of the group instrumental in helping PETRONAS achieve RE growth target and net zero carbon emission as well. But besides that, I'm also part of the Pioneer Committee for PETRONAS Leading Women Network. So shout out to all of the colleagues here. Thank you very much for attending. And I'll just say, gender D&I is big on our agenda, and I'm very happy that we are discussing that today. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Suhana. So we have heard from all three speakers. So by all means, if you have any question at all, please post your questions in the live Q&A event. And then we will try to address to you either, I think some of the technical questions have been addressed by the Secretariat. So before we go to the Q&A, I think you have heard what they call it from all three speakers on their background, so to say. I'm quite attracted by the statement by Suhana that we get to buka puasa every day now with our loved one. For me myself, this is our first what they call it, Ramadan without our maid. So that means we have to do everything ourselves. So my wife will prepare the meal. My daughter will do the dishes after buka puasa. I'll do the dishes after sahur, and then my son will do the laundry. So everybody is like helping out each other in terms of thing, and then it's without gender. So it is important that in the household that we train from young that there is no, it doesn't say that this is job for women, this is job for men. Basically, everybody needs to chip in and then help their parents, so to say. Okay. So now that it is interesting now, I think like Barbara and Dr. Wei-Nee and Suhana, you've been into both sides of the fence. I think just now I mentioned the blurring of the fence, and then you've seen the both sides of the fence. So the question now to you three, by all means, any of you can speak first. I will not choose. Do you see any difference in terms of gender diversity and participation of women between these two sectors, the renewable energy sector and the oil and gas sector? Anyone wants to take this challenge first? Okay, Barbara.
I can. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, Barbara.
Oh, okay, I see that. Sorry, Dr. Wei-Nee. Yeah, I see clear differences. The question was the differences between the two sectors, yes? I see in the renewable energy industry, I see more women in a wider range of skill sets and jobs. And I think that renewable energy by its nature is more widespread across, wind, solar, ocean, geothermal, bioenergy, and the sectors that are involved in renewable energy crosses from agriculture to marine to land, whereas the more traditional oil and gas, nuclear and coal, was more streamlined into its own area. So I see there's a wider skill set, and in my discussions with Irina and the people in our network, the women have a wider skill set, I feel. I also see a big difference. Sometimes I sit in the room and it's all women. And I mean, the first time that happened to me was only about 8 years ago. And it's because I was the director of LNG 18, which was actually was a very important project, but it wasn't, a pipeline construction or a construction project. It was an event, it was a conference, but it very much showcased the Australian LNG industry. And suddenly I realized that the gas industry is very, very male-centric. And we all commented on that at the time. And when I started in the North Sea, I was the only girl on an oil rig, or the only girl on a pipeline barge with maybe over 200 men. And I think I was the second girl in the North Sea. So I see big changes. And I also see that there's more opportunities for women and that women are taking them. I think also renewable energy is possibly more attractive at the moment to younger people across the board, young men and women. And we see more of them aiming towards renewable energy rather than what they see as the old industries, but they're not going away totally. That's what I see. Thank you.
Okay, before I what do you call it, ask more questions on that, can we shift to Dr. Wei-Nee, because I think Dr. Wei-Nee wants to say something.
Hello, you're able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think just to add on to Barbara, within the Malaysian context, in the renewable energy sector, especially in the government, as your slides have pointed out quite clearly, that, yeah, I think women participation in the government sector in the renewable is really very high. And especially if we talk about just in SEDA, SEDA had the first two CEOs that we have, it's actually female women. And at the point when I left SEDA, there was actually more than half of the total staff were actually women. Yeah, we had 76 and we had actually 39 female staff. At the management level at that time was 58%. But since I've left, and there's actually another lady has also left, so that's why today it has dropped down to 45%. But as you have correctly also pointed out, that the Ministry of Energy had the SETGEN and the Deputy SETGEN as women. Even for the Ministry of Utility in Sarawak, the perm set Dato' Elise, she is also a very high level women representative in the Sarawak energy sector. Yeah. For Hibiscus, from our in terms of the women representative, also reflected by what Barbara is saying, in the oil and gas sector, women is actually a lot lower. In total, in Hibiscus, we have about 400 staff, 22% are women. But I'm pleased to say that at a management level, we have hit over 30%. Thanks recently to we have a new COO with C Hibiscus, Puan Zalina Jamaluddin. So really very honored to have a very capable technical person on board with us. But with regards to the industry side, I can't say that there is a high women representative in the Malaysian context. SEDA has done a lot of industry engagement. And even today, if you look at the different associations like the Malaysian Photovoltaic Industry Association, the Malaysian Business Confederation, and also the Asia Pacific Biogas Alliance, the Small Hydro Association, most of them are still dominated by men. Yeah? So I think in that regards, business in the industry, they are still helmed by strongly by men. But at international platform, I do see that there is a greater balance in the gender composition. Thanks, Encik Rosman.
Thanks, Dr. Wei-Nee. You actually answered the next question to you, but never mind. The next prepared question to you. But I think, Barbara, you have another point to add?
Well, thank you. I forgot to say that actually in ARENA we have 50-50 overall, but most importantly 50-50 in the leadership positions, of which I am one, and that is just so refreshing to see. You quoted the ARENA study with an average 32% women's participation across renewable energy, and I understand it's 22% in more traditional energy companies, but that is mostly admin. So it's not balanced and it's not enough. So it's wonderful. And also I noticed that on average, I'm working with younger people in the renewable energy industry rather than the, shall we say, mature age group like us, Rosman, in the oil and gas industry. It's certainly a younger industry, and that's wonderful. Thanks.
Okay, I'm not going to compete on who's the youngest and who's the oldest in this group.
If I can add to that,
Yeah, sorry, Suana, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I can add to that, when you talk about participation between the two, so there's two aspects, the diversity and inclusion. So in terms of participation, we normally talk about how do you attract, retain, and promote talent at every level of the organization. And you looked at, you measure the diversity one, and you looked at the representation of women at senior leadership. And I'm glad that Barbara spoke about that, because it's not just population in general, but it's also representation at all level in the organization. And I like the ARENA report on gender diversity that you guys had, I think was it last year, where when you looked at the two sector, I I think then there's a much higher number, I think quite like half time more in renewable compared to oil and gas. But the number differs when you talk about senior leadership. But what I liked the most when you looked at that was the fact that, renewable energy, you're probably able to attract a lot more younger people who are more environmentally conscious. That's the word of the millennial today, right? It resonates more with the millennial. So you're able to get a lot more representation. And when you talk about renewable, we're quite a late boomer in the energy sector. So we have actually truly benefited from some of the D&I agenda that have been put forth. So we do have a lot more diverse group from that sense. And why I wanted to jump in was that while we can talk about representation and diversity today, the other aspect when you talk about attract, retain, and promote women is about inclusion. And if we don't address that, the number that you see today would not grow, or the number of the senior women representation would not get to a level that you want. Because when you talk about diversity, you talk about the people coming in. But when you talk about inclusion, how do you make sure that they stay in the organization and they get to be promoted up? So I mean, for PETRONAS Women Leading Network, I mean, that is very important. So one of the things that we try to tackle is how do you measure, how do you tackle unconscious bias, and how do you provide a conducive working environment so that you get women to be promoted up? Because we do realize there's a leaky point as women progress in the organization. So for me, that inclusiveness and inclusion is very important as well. Yeah.
Can I add to that, Rosman?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Since it's an informal dialogue. Thank you, Sahana, for that. Just to let you know, Irina did a a renewable energy wide survey with over 1,500 people in 2019. I think that's a report you were talking about. But last year we issued a wind survey of participation in the wind sector, and this year the report of that survey was issued just a couple of months at the end of last year. But we actually have a survey on solar, participation in solar right now. So please, everyone, hop onto the website and follow the links and answer the questions on solar. So that's the next report coming out. So we're really looking at the different sectors. So thank you for bringing that up, Sahana.
Maybe inject Rosman. Am I able to just add a little bit to what Suhana is talking about?
Definitely. Go ahead.
I think since this is an informal discussion, I think sometimes which sector we want to be at the end of the day is also very much tied onto the kind of lifestyle that it affords to women. Yeah, I do realize that if we talk about having to be away in some offshore platform for weeks, I think for women, most of us at one stage will be actually tied to families, and I think the ability for an industry to afford a work-life balance, I think is very important for women. And I also do realize that when it comes to parental care, women are the ones who actually would want to reach out to the parents. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we came back from New Zealand to Malaysia, is actually to be close to our parents who are actually, out of old age. So I think in that regard, sometimes it's not just faulting onto the industry, but also what kind of a lifestyle that it can afford to women. And it does, of course, help that if the company has policies that are actually, attract women to retain them, first to attract, then to retain, in terms of their recruitment policy and diversity policy. I think in that regards, I'm very pleased that Hibiscus actually made it a point that actually included in their policy for a fair and equal opportunity given to women. And also, of course, to make all efforts to retain them in their organization. I think these are important policies that made it more conducive for women to be in this industry, given that it is really a very complex, a much more taxing industry than I think renewables. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Wei-Nee. So one of the things that when you say what do you call it, making the environment a bit more inclusive, making the environment a bit more flexible, you know, that kind of thing. But one thing I think I always like to point out that whenever you make the work environment more flexible to cater for the needs of women, for example, like Dr. Wei-Nee say, needs to be closer to the family, then Suhana have to going back and having dinner with the family, you know, that kind of thing. But one of the things is men also benefit from that because I tend to say that whatever what you call flexibility that you put into the office is not just that women benefits, also benefiting men. For example, like working from home, what they call it, flexible working hours, for example. And I hope that in future it's not a 3-day paternity leave, it's more than 3-day paternity leave. Because the thing is when what you call it, when the mothers at home taking care of the children, they get 3 months taking care of the child at home. But the thing is they also need support. So where do they get support from? Is from their partners. And if their partners gets only 3 days and then goes missing to go to work, it's also not being what you call it, happening to them. So I think I'll be the first one to call for a longer paternity leave in this country. But I digress. Okay. So I think I want to shift back to Barbara, because Barbara, you mentioned just now there's already the survey on the wind energy and the solar survey coming in. So IRENA is essentially the authority for renewable energy in the world globally. And then, do you have a specific target for women participation in the renewable energy sector?
Oh, good question. You mean in terms of within IRENA or within this sector?
Within this sector.
And sorry, a women's packet. What do you mean by that?
A target, you mean?
Oh, target. Sorry. I thought it was a packet.
Are you looking at 50%, or is there a gradual target that you are looking at, or how does it work?
So I'm not aware of a target. It's not something that IRENA pushes, because I think IRENA is smart enough to know that in different areas and different circumstances, and in particular in different cultures, you maybe could get more than 50, or you would never get 50. So target is not something, I mean, I think all of us should aim for a target of 50-50 because that's the natural population. But in some areas, I think if that's unrealistic, you shouldn't push it. That's my personal opinion. I don't see evidence of a defined target in IRENA, more an understanding that the renewable energy offers women more opportunities because it's decentralized. It's not the big major companies. It's not the older mindset. Like I say, you know, literally the average age of the traditional oil and gas, coal and nuclear is aging. It's a younger industry, and often it's more suited to women with more decentralized, maybe part-time, bespoke jobs in the field and in the office. So I think if you were to set a target, it has to be either a national target or possibly a regional, or possibly within a skill set within a wind or solar or ocean. So I hope that answers your question, that about targets having to suit different cultures and regions.
Yeah, sure. I think that this is one of the areas that we need. That I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of traditionally the energy sector has been male dominated, because I think since the days of in Malaysia you have LLN, before that you have the Central Electricity Board, so it has always been a male dominated. Then you have PETRONAS coming in, still male dominated. There's also a transition in the early days where the transition from foreign expertise towards local expertise, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of transition going on. So now the transition is going towards more participation in women. Just now, Dr. Wei-Nee also mentioned that solar doesn't have too much participation in what you call it in women. I think that the things are improving. There's a subsidiary in Petronas called G-Sparks, and G-Sparks, I think their total employment, there's more than 50% women, including in the technical areas. I think it's quite important that what we need to say that when we say higher women participation, if you look even into the board members, in the management, senior management of the energy companies that I portrayed earlier, a lot of the women participation there are in the so-called non-technical sector. Non-technical means not non-technical engineering related sector. So it's mostly on finance, HR, and also maybe on the legal side. Okay, so I think that it is also shown in the data by Arena, where as you go along from STEM to non-STEM to administrative, women are more towards administrative and less of STEM. And then when you look into the school system in Malaysia, I think there are more than 50% now are taking STEM classes are women. So you have the funnel where you have more women participating in the early days, but as you go up along the hierarchy chains, then you have less and less percentage. I think this is something that PLWN is addressing. So maybe Suhana, you want to elaborate more on the attempts from because I think you have I call it the leaking pipe. So you have this kind of pipe where you started the funnel, where you started a large funnel, and then as you go along, the funnel gets smaller, and then you get what I call it women dropping out of the working because of challenges, especially when they start a new family, then they start dropping out, that kind of thing. So you mentioned just now flexible working hours, and so what are the things that PLWN are doing in terms of trying to first retain women in what I call it in engineering in the technical sector, and secondly to grow the pipeline for leadership.
Okay, sure. I think you're absolutely right. When you talk about again addressing women at leadership, it's about, do you have the right pool to begin with? And when you see all these leaky point where women start dropping out, you don't have enough pool to actually push these women up. So one of the things that we tried to do was, let's go back to the funnel, the very beginning, and see how can we have a lot more representation of women in the organization. And to do this, Petronas being an organization that look through not just oil and gas, but we've got our education sector, and we've got a lot of other sector that work collaboratively with us, looking at how do we address this. So at PLWN, we took a very conscious effort that we're gonna address talent pool from the very start, from how you attract. Hence, a lot of the effort that we do here today with the education unit is going back to the university, addressing issues around how do we attract a lot more ladies, engineers, those in STEM, to come and join oil and gas. Interestingly, in Malaysia, when you talk about representation of female in university, in engineering especially, you see quite balanced, 50-50. So there's enough ladies out there to actually enter the organization. But you don't see these ladies, the number being translated to the organization. I mean, we are now at about 27% female at early entry. So where's the rest of the ladies? So these are the kind of things that we need to do, attract them by going down to the ground and see what kind of issues are out there, and how do we address the attraction part. But from Petronas Leading Women perspective, when we talk about those three, attract, retain, and promote, there are 4 focus areas that we do, not just from the attraction, but how do you retain and how do you support the promotion of women. So our focus area looks into how do we partner with HR better in terms of increasing the funnel, because simple things like when you go for interview, right? If you have an all-male panel, in a panel interview where you're interviewing female, you don't create that inclusivity factor to actually build that confidence for female to actually come in. So those are the kind of things that you want to be having a conversation with HR even, or when you actually put out CV, let's not talk about whether, female, male, and all that. Is all about who matters, or increase the pool factor so that you have a lot more women to be considered. So that's one that we're trying to do today. Secondly, when we talk about gender agenda, I like when Hazli mentioned just now that he's one of the many male that are in PLWN, because that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have an increase of male participation in gender agenda, because when we talk about gender D&I, it's not a female only issue, it's a business issue. So we need representation from all gender to talk about gender D&I and how to do better. But thirdly, is about, yes, creating a work environment that support female staff. And I think Dr. Wei-Nee mentioned, we need all this flexibility. And when we talk about flexibility, you're right, it doesn't just help women, but it helps men as well. And funnily, when we talk about this, right, one of the things that we actually tried and championed a couple of years ago was PPE. So PPE is our first line of defense. And when you talk about PPE for female, you sometimes don't get PPE that fits. Either it's too big, too long, and etc. And we fight to have the right PPE being given to people, so that you're talking about tailored PPE that suits your body. Because again, PPE is the first line of defense. You need to make sure that you've got the right PPE to protect you against any harm. But once we did that, we've got a lot of great feedback from men themselves, because there's a lot of one-pack men who actually like those ideas, because now they actually get PPE that fits them as well. So I mean, those are the kind of thing that we thought that was great, both benefited both men and women. But lastly, again, when we talk about inclusivity, was one that we champion a lot, is how do you tackle unconscious bias. And because this is real, regardless of which industry you're from and what you do, unconscious bias is real, especially in workforce. And the one that's affected the most are female. So for us at PLWN in Petronas, we do have our unconscious bias training, so that we are much more aware in terms of conversation, in terms of how do we treat both male and female, and how we can actually do better from tackling unconscious bias. So there's a lot of focus areas and areas that we're looking at, but we're slowly getting there, and hoping that we could help attract a lot more women to come in, retain them within the organization, and have a lot more representation of female in senior leadership. Yeah.
So thank you very much. So I want to pick up your point on the unconscious bias, but before I go there, I seems to see conversation between Azrina and Barbara going on in the Q&A section, and then I think Barbara has answered quite a number of the questions already. But now, don't worry, audience, we will pick up your question soon. The thing is, we have to admit something, okay? This is actually the first time that MGA is using a live event to broadcast our show. So you can see there's some hiccups in terms of the camera change, that kind of thing. So unfortunately, you guys are the guinea pig today in terms of our system. But there's always something that needs to be learned. I want to pick up on the unconscious bias, but I want to move towards the transition unconscious bias. I'm not sure whether I want to address this to Dr. Wei-Nee first. Okay, is there an unconscious bias between? Let's put gender aside. Is there an unconscious bias between the two sectors, renewable energy and oil and gas sector? Things like, she's from renewable energy. Is there such bias existing in terms of the two sectors? Dr. Wei-Nee?
Yeah, thanks, Encik Rosman. It is a very tricky question, because it is a question on perception. Personally, for me, I don't have that kind of biasness. But if the question is with regards to why women representative is low in the oil and gas sector, I think I'm very new to this sector, and when I came into this sector, one of the early lessons that I've learned is that there is really very little job security in the oil and gas sector. Very well, if you are one of the oil majors, or you are big enough to be able to support your staff through the very difficult times. But when I am with now that I'm in the oil and gas sector, I do realize that, and I do hear words that jobs within this sector is really very highly risky. So if the prices of oil come down, then the numbers will start cutting. Yeah. And in the renewable energy sector, which has actually flourished last year despite the pandemic, and largely thanks to the government's strong policy in recovery that combine both the green element and the economic recovery, renewables have grown very strongly. But if you read in the press how much jobs have lost through the oil and gas sector, and I think women by nature, we are very risk averse. Yeah, we do not want to actually land up without job security. I think that by itself, I felt could be actually, disincentivizing women to work in such a risky area. Besides the work itself, the technical part is already very challenging, combined with the demands of the household. And secondly, in Rosman, as Suhana was talking, I seldom share with people about what I did for my doctorate study, but actually my doctorate study is about women, yeah? And part of the reason why in Malaysia, and even if you look at the renewable energy sector, largely the industry is still at the highest level, is still dominated by men. And I think it is that good old glass ceiling, or in Malaysia, we don't even call it glass ceiling, we actually call it a concrete ceiling by now. Much of the network is still controlled by men, yeah? And I think at the international level, there is much more women integration into the high industry network in terms of the networks. But within the local context, it's still largely, helmed by the what we call the old boys network. And I think this battle of the glass ceiling, unless we form that credible enough pool of networks for women to support one another, I think it will still be a disadvantage for women. Yeah, I mean, if you go out to the, I do know that men at the end of the day, they just go out to the pubs and hang out and drink, and from there there's a lot of market intelligence that they can draw from one another. But women, for us, at the end of the day, we just want to rush home and quickly, and we have our own family responsibilities. So I think this is where sometimes we are disadvantaged. But I'm not sure also to what aspect is that real, because in part of my studies, we found out that there is also what we call the queen bee syndrome, whereby women also sometimes we work against our disadvantage. Some women, not all, they do not like to see other women progress. Hopefully this is back in the days of the dinosaur. It's not happening now, because women should really try to promote one another. But it is the findings of some studies that women in certain, some women, they really prohibit others to rise up in the management level. So yeah, there are many barriers for women, barring which industry that you are working with. But of course, certain industry, the barriers become even stronger. So yeah, I think these are just some of the inherent challenges that we are facing. Thank you, Encik Rosman.
It's quite interesting on your part on the queen bee, because I also have admission from certain some women who says that I will never work for a women boss.
Can I add to that, Rosman, please?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Barbara.
I also think the gas industry has never been the most attractive industry. It's always suffered from a bad image, and but I think it's just very bad at marketing itself, and it needs more advocacy. I mean, I've had the most exciting career I think I could ever have had, really, it's taken me to so many places, and I didn't really outline in my introduction. I've done engineering, then I did environmental studies, then I did law, and climate change law was part of that, and that was hilarious because there is no climate change law. You can, now there's a little bit of, you can prove a nexus between emissions from some site or plant to air pollution or something, but 15, 20 years ago when I studied, it wasn't. So it's been very exciting, and the gas industry has always been in transition. First it was small onshore, then it was big offshore, then it was coal seam, then LNG is ramped up really fast. And I think I talk on these panels and do my best to advocate that actually the gas industry, how exciting is it to be part of an industry that has to change the whole way it does its business and has to adapt and stay essential, and how does that happen? And there are ways, and that's through keeping your business but transporting green gases, and maybe swapping your skill sets from drilling for gas to drilling for geothermal or water or other industries. There's a lot of transferable skills. So I still think that the gases, with a plural, industry is still really exciting, and would encourage people to get involved in gases. It's the same supply chain, project management, kind of international business models, although it will be a lot more decentralized. So I like to think there's lots of opportunities. It will shrink. The IRENA outlook to 2050 estimates that to achieve the 1.5 degree scenario, 51% of end use will be electricity, but the other 49% cannot be electrified, and this is end use. Power can be renewable, but overall power at the moment is 20% of end use. So gases, green gases and bioenergy and geothermal and other sources are needed, and that the natural gas will go down to 25% of what it is now. So it's not going away, but part of the gas industry will produce and transport hydrogen, biomethane, and sector coupling and storage of energy. So I still think it's an exciting space, is what I'm trying to say. Thank you. For women as well as men. Yeah.
And also interesting for natural gas. Sorry, I'm being paid to say natural gas all the time. I think my what I call it, my salary is based on how many times I mention natural gas in my in 1 hour. Anyway,
we have to get used to actually saying gases, don't we? And I say, someone says gas, which gas are you talking about? Just to clarify it. I want to just continue on the gas side. You mentioned just now about the gas, the gases. So I won't. Okay, basically, eventually, Malaysian Gas Association will also transition towards more inclusive on gas. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, it's not yet economically viable to produce more renewable gas. There are opportunities. There are companies who are looking into injecting biogas into the natural gas system. So we have a lot of palm oil plantation, which the effluents release methane. So the methane that is captured can be injected into the into the gas pipeline. And the other aspect that is being looked at is, I think Dr. Wei-Nee mentioned Sarawak Energy. So Sarawak Energy also embarking on in terms of producing green hydrogen from the power plant, so the hydropower plant. So we have now Bakun, we have Murom, then Baleh construction will take probably another 6 years. That will add another 1,002 to the system. So there is a lot of hydro potential that can be used to harness green hydrogen. And then if the thing is, one of the ministries in Malaysia is supposed to be undertaking a hydrogen economy roadmap.
but just trying to find out when are they going to start doing that. So if the ministry is listening to us, MGA would like to also to participate in this drafting of the roadmap, as we have been participating in drafting of the natural gas roadmap, which is being spearheaded by Economic Planning Unit. I would like now to take one question from the audience. There's a question by Irma Suryati. There's two parts to the question. One part, they are talking about the wages of the two sectors, oil and gas, oil, gas and power. When will it merge? I'm not so sure what is meant by that, because I do see people in the power sector also driving BMWs and Mercedes. So I'm not sure what we are, what is disparity. There's no study being done in terms of disparity between the salary of the power and also the oil and gas. But I would like to take out on the second question. It says here, please comment on the need for reskilling the oil and gas personnel to be ready to go into renewable energy. I would like to bring this question to Suhana, because you are from, I think last year, you were with your EVP at that time?
Yeah.
So is there any reskilling required when you as an oil and gas person wants to venture into renewable energy?
Right. I think I'm quite fortunate because in Petronas there's a lot of opportunity to transition between one sector to another, and we do have our own training mode and opportunity that's being given in the organization. So when you talk about the two sectors, I think one thing to note was that what I like when you talk about comparison between if you're drilling a high pressure, high thermal well, transitioning to a geothermal later would be easier because it's the same set of skill. Or when you're constructing offshore wind, etc., when you talk about the base and all, it's quite the same skill set. So there are some skill set that are easily transferred because it's the same mode and all that. I now do portfolio management where I do look into portfolio maximization of our assets and our portfolio of opportunities from either when you look to on financing, when you looked into sale, etc. In terms of how do we actually bring the value higher. The great thing about what I see in my organization is the fact that we do have a mix of very capable people that we actually brought in from outside, and there's a lot of what you call knowledge transfer and learning opportunity within the organization that are, you don't have to have a formal structure in order to learn, right? There's always informal structure where learning is made possible. And today, because when you talk about renewable, it's the topic where everyone is keen and wanted to share. So I do benefit from the fact that we subscribe to a lot of consultants out there, and then we go and talk to a lot of companies out there as well. So a lot of the reskilling not comes from I wait that this opportunity come to me and I get to learn more, but I go out and seek a lot more conversation outside and learn a lot more. So a lot of it actually came from, like how do you initiate it yourself? And I think that's important. That, when you talk about upskilling and reskilling, it's not about waiting for it to come, but making that initiative for you to go out and learn more. So things like this, when you go and attend today's webinar, you get some knowledge. I do hope there's something that you actually bring back. Or when you listen to other consultants, the BNF, the IHS out there, there's things that you learn and you'll be able to converse. When I was in a hydrogen study before, we talked to all of the consultants out there and all the technical consultants out there just to learn a bit more as well. So all these are opportunities that is available out there for you to knock on and make available to yourself if you make that initiative. So for me, it's about how do you initiate it yourself. There are things that when you talk about reskilling, it's about like some of the skill that today in oil and gas are easily transferable, but also like what do you do on your own that make you become a competent renewable player. Hope that answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think you're right about the reskilling. So back in 2016, when Hazli Sham offered me this position, the only thing I know about gas, the gas that goes into the power plant through the gas receiving station, and then that's the only thing I know. And then we are talking about the calorific value, the C plus, how much C plus we have, how it goes into the gas turbine, that kind of thing. So that's the only thing I know. But you are right. You need to take. Basically, I think all of our job give us a certain level of skill that is basically transferable. And what you need to do is basically have their own initiative in terms of reskilling yourself. And then sometimes nowadays is quite what do you call it? You are quite fortunate. There's a lot of webinars going on, free webinars. So just join the free webinars, then you can gain a lot of knowledge. I would like to pick up a question because Azrina has been quite diligently putting comments. One of the comments that she made is that she is interested to hear what are the thoughts of the panelists on SDG. So it's good to share. For example, if we talk about minority groups, do we include indigenous women too, that kind of thing, because they tend to be forgotten. Maybe Dr. Wei-Nee coming from what they call it, coming from Sarawak, this question would suit you better?
Okay, I think indigenous women, I think at the end of the day, Encik Rosman, I am always of the opinion that as long as an organization does not discriminate against an opportunity for women, I think that is very important. I still remember about 20 years ago, I attended a talk by Tan Sri Rafida Aziz, and it was actually also about these gender issues. And she made a point whereby I still will always remember for a very long time. She said that you never just set a quota just so that you can fulfill it and you force women just to fulfill it. It actually has to be a fit from both sides, that women themselves want to do it, and the opportunity also does not exclude them from actually fulfilling, the passion to do it. I think it has to be, a both way things, and also that I always remember that a quota is there not as a cap, but as a floor. So when an organization says that we want to have 30%, women representative, that 30% is not a cap, but a floor. So I think with regards to that question, I think the important thing is still a good fit between women desiring to go into that sector, and that sector avail themselves, that does not exclude them that particular opportunities.
About not excluding the opportunity. I would like to pick up a comment, sorry, the question is comment coming from Anonymous at 4:09 p.m., which has 4 thumbs up. So I think this is a popular question, popular comment. So Anonymous said, this is true. I hope that the company can hire more ladies in the male-dominated industry. I remember there's a vacant, well-known oil and gas company in Malaysia, and sadly they were only looking for male staff. Another example, I went to a well-known oil and gas company in Malaysia, and the manager asked whether I have any plan to get married soon. This was the 3rd time I've heard every time I went for interview as engineer. We ladies, sorry, we in generally ladies, when for in the technical industry can't get married forever, maybe. The thing is, I think it's not just men who has this perception. I know of what they call it, of a women manager who's worried of hiring women because she thinks that, oh, the women might disappear for 3 months because they will get married, get pregnant, kind of thing. So I think I'll bring this to Barbara. You have been working all over the world. How do we then is this a real global problem, or is it just in Malaysia that employers tend to look for men because thinking men would be more flexible?
Yeah, it's interesting. I read that from Anonymous, and my answer was, oh my God, I was asked that in 1984. I mean, do some things never change? And of course, I lied at the time. But it suited at the time. I think that things are changing. I know that here in Germany, the maternity and paternity can be taken 50-50, and I think it's a year and a half. It's quite a long time, or sorry, is it 9 months? But you can share it between yourself and your wife. And my husband runs a large company, and he has many men who are off for a few months paternity leave. So I think that is a huge step forward, and if more countries and companies could adopt that, actually it's equal absence from work for men and women. But all I can do is talk from my experience. When I was first pregnant, I offered to my employer, and I was on a project, a pipeline project. I was through a consultancy, so I wasn't staff. But and this was the time in the early 90s when actually the internet, it was around, but it was still quite new for these gas companies and construction companies. And I made an offer. I said, I will, stay at home. I can come in 2 days a week because my husband at the time could look after the baby, and I will get the internet, and I will get a laptop, and I will make sure that everything's continuous. And they trusted that, and it worked really well. So much so that I worked from home 2 days a week for years and years and years after, because it was just a wonderful life balance. But I would say that any women I know who are in a career and at the stage of having kids or thinking about it, they are so dedicated to their job that it's never been a hindrance. And often women can job share, or like I did, go part-time, but actually work really efficiently and really well and continue, and there wasn't much of a gap. But so saying that, I think a lot has to change in allowing women and the fathers to take maternity and paternity leave. But I think it'll take a generation or two to change with senior management. I think one of the best things I've done is raise 2 wonderful young men. I've got 2 sons, and they're just so aware of the issues that I think there's an absolute generation change coming. I hope that answers your question, Rosman.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry, Rosman, if I can just add on to that.
Yeah,
Because I like this. And when you bring back the conversation about unconscious bias, right? And we need more conversation around this. And I'll share 2 things from our own experience and when we have this conversation. So we conduct unconscious bias workshop to the staff so that they are much more aware about it. In one of the conversation that we had was, one of the staff actually spoke about opportunity, and he was actually recruiting for one of the project in Middle East. And he said that I don't have enough people, but I can't recruit women because it's not a safe environment for them to work. Our question back to him was that, why did they refuse in the first place? Or did you even ask? He sat down and said, no, I didn't ask. I assume. So this is a person who had good intention. He felt that he wanted to make sure that the female staff are protected. He felt that the Middle East was not a safe environment. He never asked a question in the first place. So without having that opportunity to ask and make women make that choice, you're stopping women from actually advancing in the career. Well, the intention may be well, but it was not put in the right place. And another story that we had from our unconscious bias workshop was, this was from one of the male that attended the session. And he said, I will just rephrase what he said. You know what, I always thought that it's all about PLWN, and what we're trying to do is all about women issue, until one day he came to a session when his wife actually dragged him to sit in that session and listen to all these women about all of the issues that they had. And then he said, I came to the realization that it's only not my wife who've been complaining and talking about this, but there's a lot of feedback from other women as well. And today he's one of the more active person because he had that awareness that, oh, I have biasness, I now have better understanding, and I will today avoid this kind of conversation about, are you married? Can you do it? And all that. So I think addressing that unconscious bias, having a lot more conversation is necessary and is important in each organization. Yep.
Yeah, I think from now on we should treat recruitment like a tender process. So that means the person who's doing the evaluation will receive this pile of application, and the application will come from applicants A, applicants B, applicant C, with no names, no age, no gender, and just the credentials are put there. So probably that should be the way forward when you're trying to sift for new applicants, so the unconscious bias is not there. I'm also a victim of, I'm not sure whether it's unconscious bias or conscious bias, because when I applied for a job years ago as a project manager for a project in Sudan, they say, from what I gather, I didn't get the job because I was too nice. So, okay. So I'm not sure whether it's conscious and unconscious bias. Okay, so we are running out of time now. So I would like now to invite each of you, if you have, because we only have a few minutes left, so I limit it to one. If you have one advice that you would give to other women who might consider a shift, a transition in the energy sector, what would it be? I will start with Dr. Wei-Nee.
Only one advice. I think for my age, I'm entitled to.
Okay, go ahead. Go.
Yeah, okay.
That means Johanna will be half right.
No, that would be bias. Yeah, that would be bias. So yeah, I think my advice is that I do notice that when an opportunity is given to women, in my past conversations, I do realize that women they have to make sure that they have all the skills necessary in order to deliver it. And sometimes they will just miss an opportunity. They'll just forego that opportunity because they said that I'm not up to it yet. And my advice to women is that if you have some of the skills, and opportunities are very hard to come by, if that opportunities align with your passion, just jump into that opportunity first. And then after that, you worked very, very hard to actually, deliver and make sure that you deliver. But to me, I think opportunities are hard to come by, jump onto that opportunities, don't miss out on that. And I noticed that this is what men do very well. When they see an opportunity, they seize it very quickly, and then they suss it out later on how they're going to achieve it. And I think my second advice is to young women, especially today, your resources are very important to you. Make the best use of the resources. I've always said to my two daughters, if you just tell me how you spend your time, who you spend with, how you spend your money, how you spend your energy, I can already tell you what your future will be like. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the man is always like that when the boss say, can you do this? Sure, boss, can one. Then after that, we figure out what to do. Okay. Then the next one, I will invite Suhana also to give the one advice. Suhana.
Okay. I would just say that the biggest critique to women development, and the one that probably demonstrated the biggest bias of all at times, are actually women to women. And I think I echo what Dr. Wei-Nee said exactly. What I'll say is, let's move away from this and start supporting each other, because we are already a minority, and it is even harder when we don't get the support within our own circle. So let's try and push everyone up rather than pull people down. So if you are going to renewable, I'll support you, and let's try and keep the circle knit and support each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should support each other, no matter whether it's what call it, women, men, or women, men, and men. I think we need. Everything is the world the world, what they call it, boundary has blurred so much that we need each other's support. Okay. Last but not least, would like now to invite, this is not unconscious bias, but this is basically a Malaysian hospitality where we give what they call it, we give hormat. That means we give respect to our guests from overseas. So I will now let what they call it, invite Barbara to give her one advice.
Oh, terima kasih, that's lovely. Off the top of my head, 3 points in one sentence, which is follow your heart. If you want to do something, you do it, and don't let anything you think might be a barrier. Have a go, and if you fail, that's fine, but you will probably succeed. If you love what you're doing, pick something that needs to be fixed. Pick an industry, pick the renewables, pick the gas industry, and make it better. Pick something that needs to be fixed and go fix it. And number 3 is, I have never refused to talk to a younger woman or help with, if I can, with advice. I've always signed up for mentor programs, but I've always answered. So my 3rd piece of advice is select a woman that you admire and just make contact. And I think 99, possibly 100% of the time, that woman would be happy to talk to you, and pick your role model and try and make contact. And there's ways of doing that with LinkedIn and the internet and the networks. So don't be scared to reach out and ask for help from women that you admire, would be my advice. And thank you again for this, Rosman.
Thank you, Baba. It's always a pleasure to have you. Okay, that's basically the end, unfortunately. Some of us have to go home to prepare meals for buka puasa. That's breakfasting to you, Barbara. So very what you call it, I think we had a good conversation today. I think we all realized the problem. Now it's just a matter of us taking ownership individually and also as a collective group in terms of solving the problem. There are what they call it. There are quite a number of initiatives being done. There are quite a number of organizations out there. There's PLWN who's championing in terms of in PETRONAS. Just now, Dr. Wei-Nee mentioned Selwyn, the Sarawak Energy Leading Women Network, and there's also MyWe, which I actually helped maneuver to form MyWe back in 2018. So my memory is quite short now. It started off when myself and a person called Ilham from Pemandu. We actually established the first forum on women in energy in 2017, where MGA organized. That was so successful that it led to the eventual formation of MyWe, of which Malaysia is secretariat now. If you look at the logo for MyWe, the Malaysian Women in Energy, the M is actually is taken from the logo of MGA. We just cut the logo a bit and take the M and then form into the MyWe kind of thing. So that's where the root of MyWe is actually from MGA itself. So sad to say goodbye to all of you, but don't leave first, because the proper closing will be done by Bella. So I would like now to invite Bella back to the stage. Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Encik Rosman and all speakers. Very interesting conversations. I can see quite a number of comments and feedbacks in the chat box. Thank you so much for your active participation. So, well, what I can say is that empowering women in clean energy transitions is one way to help achieve sustainable recoveries, and it is crucial that we all recognize the economic, environmental, and social benefits that gender equality delivers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps out our event for today. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to thank you for all making your time in your busy schedule. It's been our pleasure to host this event, and I wish you all pleasant evening. Don't forget to fill up the feedback form by scanning the QR code there. All right, thank you so much, and selamat berbuka.
Thank you. Selamat berbuka, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Chusi.
Thank you.
Bye.